to you. The reading is from Romans chapter 12, verses 9 to 12. Love is action. Love must be sincere. Hate what is evil, cling to what is good. Be devoted to one another in love, and honour one another above yourselves. Never be lacking in zeal, but keep your spiritual fervour, serving the Lord. Be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, faithful in prayer. Amen. These few verses are another few verses that I'm going to spend a couple of weeks over. I want to start with a question though, and I'm expecting an answer, okay? When you go about your daily lives, when you go about the community, your neighbourhood, the workplace, the groups you may attend, the GP surgery, the hospital, what do you see? Okay, so what do you see? Call it out. Yes, Elaine. Lots of smiley faces. There we go. Yes, what else do we see? Sorry? Anxious people. Okay, anxious people. Amanda?
People bearing huge burdens.
People bearing huge burdens. Okay.
People preoccupied.
Okay, there's a theme coming out here. Preoccupied people.
Usually what you expect to see.
What you expect to see. Okay. Sylvia? Traffic. Litter. I did hear someone say dogs.
Yes, dogs.
I think there was one dog named in particular. Beautiful flowers and trees. Jude?
People wearing headphones.
Okay, people wearing headphones, earpods, whatever. Okay. Anything else?
The sky.
The sky.
Birdsong.
Birdsong, okay, birds, nature. Anyone who found that question really hard? No?
I think sometimes you do. Sometimes I don't see. Sometimes I'm not looking.
Yeah, sometimes we don't see. We're not looking. Right, my scribe is tapping away here. And when he's finished tapping, he's going to put it up on the screen. There we go. As if by magic. Right, so. There we go. Lovely. So, actually, some of these responses, we are taking notice. Smiley faces, anxious people, people bearing burdens, but then there's the what you expect to see. And sometimes we don't see at all. We're just going to leave that up. I want to suggest, as Trish acknowledged, that a lot of the time we don't see at all. Because we're on a mission, we've got things to do, places to go, people to be, we've got our own concerns. And that's often the way that we are, that's the way we're wired. We're busy. And we know this street because I go up and down it every day. It becomes like white noise, it's just background stuff. So often in life, we see it at a surface level. But as I have been thinking more about how we interact with our communities, and particularly more recently, I am coming to the conclusion But the way that we see and engage in our everyday lives affects our motivation for mission and engagement. For example, if we are the ones, and I know I do this from time to time because I'm trying to catch up with stuff, going around with our headphones on and on our phones, if we are the preoccupied, if we are the anxious, we're just in our own little bubbles. If we walk up and down and we just see the dogs and the grass and it's just life, we're just going to see at a surface level. And we get on with our lives. But if all seems well, but we have acknowledged that not all is well. But if we go around thinking, well, all seems well, then why do we need Jesus' commission of why he came to heal the sick, to open the eyes of the blind, to set the captives free? If we are seeing life at a certain level, but if we acknowledge these anxious people bearing huge burdens, preoccupied people, then where is the intersect between them and that? And Jesus' commission of I've come to heal the sick, open the eyes of the blind, open the ears, set the captives free. I want to take you to a passage in Matthew 9, 35 to 38. Jesus is in the full throes of his ministry, and Matthew has recorded miracles of healing, even raising the dead, calming the storm, calling the disciples, clashes with the Pharisees. And then we read this. Jesus went through all the towns and villages, teaching in their synagogues, proclaiming the good news of the kingdom and healing every disease and illness. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them because they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into his harvest field. It's a familiar passage to many, I'm sure. But I wonder if there was a reporter on the road that day, following after Jesus and interviewing people in the crowds, as we see so often these days. I suspect they would have seen themselves differently. They would have seen themselves as people interested in spectacle. Will we see a miracle today? Will they receive a miracle? Would their curiosity about this man be satisfied? They have come out for a reason. They have left behind their fields and their work because they are interested in this man. I wonder how many of them would have described themselves as harassed and helpless. Jesus' days were demanding and full. All kinds of people came to him. But what I noticed from this passage is that Jesus saw beyond the crowds and what they wanted. What he saw is what they needed. He had compassion on them because he saw past what they presented. He saw to their very hearts. And his heart ached for them. But he also wanted his disciples to understand the urgency. The harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. And then he says to them, ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into his harvest field. And I'm sure we'd all be very glad to do that. And we will do that, right? Yes, Lord, send them out. And then we go into the next chapter and we realise that send them out is, yeah, that's you. Because I'm sending you. All 12 of you in this passage. When it's recorded in Luke, it's a bit different. If you look at what
comes immediately before that passage. We have the healing of 2 men who are blind, and the deliverance of a man who was mute so he could speak. When you read the Gospels, take note of how miracles and teaching dovetail together, particularly healings of the blind. Jesus has come that the blind can see. That's not just the physically blind, but the spiritually blind. And in this case, it's the disciples who are spiritually blind and need their tongues released to speak, because Jesus is about to send them out. Proclaim the message of the kingdom, heal those who are ill, raise the dead, cleanse those with leprosy, drive out demons. And then he says this in chapter 10, verse 8, freely you have received, freely give. These disciples have been called apart by Jesus for a task. He's given them freely of his grace, of the Spirit. There's going to be some time before the Spirit comes in full power on them. But they're not just called to follow Jesus around and do the shopping and sort out the accommodation. No, even in these early days, and remember these are the early days of Jesus' ministry, Jesus sends them out to put into practice what they have seen. I am not just a spectacle. I have come to bring in the kingdom, and you are part of it. How would you feel to be part of those first disciples and being sent out if you've only been following a little while? I don't know about you, but a trip like that would certainly be good for my prayer life. It certainly would. I would be petrified. And I'm sure sometimes we are called to step out of our comfort zones. And we'd rather go, no, thank you, and stay in my comfort zone. But Jesus stretches us, because it's only when we're out of our comfort zone that we can see Jesus at work. When we're not in our own strength, when we are weak, he is strong. When we are walking by faith, then we see God at work, because there is no way that we can claim the glory for ourselves. But there is an urgency in Jesus' sending. The harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. In those verses Charlotte read to us, following on from what we've been looking at in the last couple of weeks, Paul is urging, and he is urging the church in Rome to have a right perspective of the mercy they've received. They have freely received. And Paul, in his own ways, is saying, freely give. Freely give to the work together as a body, each one playing their part. And love is to be at the heart. Love must be sincere. But right in the middle of those verses, in verse 11, he says, never be lacking in zeal. Keep your spiritual fervour, serving the Lord. It wasn't an easy time for Christians in Rome. The Jewish converts had been forced to leave because they were blamed for causing issues and causing upset, because they were proselytes and under Christ. Jews and Gentiles were trying to work out how they were to work together. But there was a bigger issue at stake. Paul was writing this letter from Corinth, and he had a vision. He had a vision for a mission in Spain, and as he moved from east to west, Rome was going to be the ideal base for him to do it. Paul knew the harvest was plentiful and the workers were few, but this mission was on his heart, and he was prepared to risk everything, even a trip to Rome, in order to try to do what was on his heart. Well, we know that he never got to Spain. He only ever got as far as Rome. But Paul was prepared to step out. The harvest is plentiful, the workers are few. And stepping into new ground required fervour, it required zeal. And Paul sends this letter ahead of himself to the Roman Christians to inspire them, to bring them back to basics, to see how they could also be part of the mission. Paul had a vision and he wasn't prepared to settle for anything less. Well, what have these two passages got to do with us? The harvest is plentiful. The workers are few. I've been living with this verse for a number of weeks now. We can get so used to our surroundings that we miss the obvious. Where God is at work. And when we miss where he is at work, we also miss the opportunity to join with him. And when we don't have his perspective and are just going about business as usual, what happens is we lose our zeal. We lose our spiritual fervour. We might not use those words specifically. It might be our passion. Because why do we need passion if we're not doing anything? We're just being busy. We come to church and we do the bits that we do. But if we haven't got a vision for the mission, the vision for sharing the good news of Jesus, what do we need passion for? It will just dissipate away. And it's not to say that we don't do good stuff. Remember those balloons I had on Pentecost? We had the one that was full of the Spirit, and then we had the tired ones left over from Brian and Pat's party. And they were still bringing joy to the children, but they weren't as good as what they were designed to be used for. And that can be us. A few weeks ago, I sat down for an inspiring conversation with Anna Ogno. She's the youth worker at St Nick's, about the needs and opportunities for the youth work in this area. And we tried to find a Sunday where she could come and speak herself, but we couldn't find one that worked. And some of the first words she said to me in speaking about ministry in Allestree was, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. There are over 6,000 under-19s in Allestree and Darley wards, according to the 2021 census. Schools are largely, in our area, open to connection and input. Woodlands has opened up, and this has been years of hard graft and prayer for Woodlands to open up under the new head, which has been there about 3 or 4 years now, but under that head for us to be able to go back in again. And just before Amy left, that pastoral work had started. And every week Amy would come back from Woodlands and tell me something of the needs of the young people in the school, that they would never cross a church threshold. But to have one-to-one, somebody to listen, somebody to be Christ to them, somebody to have a heart, to have compassion on them. What a privilege. What a privilege. And that is still a possibility. On Tuesday afternoons, the new youth work that started with Amy opposite Woodlands School, now supported only by Anna and Wyman. It's based at St Nick's. They're just getting to know the young people again. And at the time I spoke to her, each week it was growing. There were 5 the first week, 16 the next week, 20, 22, 30 were coming. That's how quickly it was growing. It has lots of potential. It runs the same time as the Woodlands Evangelical Youth Group, but draws young people who would never cross a church threshold at this point. If we do not meet those young people in the community, they're not going to cross the threshold into the church. The harvest is plentiful, the workers are few. Speaking with Sharon Shipley at St Alkmund's Children and Families Worker, there is opportunity to develop work in Mark Eaton School through the Open the Book assemblies, and thank you to those who join with her and go into Open the Book. These are the assemblies telling the Bible stories, the experience festivals, Christingles. There is a desire to start the lunch club again, to offer more pastoral support for the staff. The opportunity is there, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. This week, as I was saying farewell to a St Benedict's class, they are coming in and I'm showing them around, talking to them about signs and symbols, opportunity to share the gospel with them. Ben Martin, who is attached to St Albans, he's a pioneer on the West End. I had only been saying to someone that morning, I really need to meet with Ben. I really need to catch up and talk about what is happening in the West End, to bring him here. And there he was, walking past the church with Aidan, who's the diocesan youth lead. Ben runs a community warm space. He's a key part of the Repair Cafe, which I know a couple of you are involved with, amongst other things. And as I went up to him and we had a conversation, I was sharing something of my heart of the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. And they said, that's funny that. We are walking and talking and praying and we are saying exactly the same thing. The harvest is plentiful, the workers are few. Every month, church leaders gather here for an hour of praying. And why do we pray right across the city? Because there is an urgency. The harvest is plentiful, the workers are few. How we see our community will directly affect our motivation for mission. Jesus had compassion on the people he saw. How do we see our community? What about the older generation? I've talked a lot about the children and youth. I think we've got the picture on that one. What do we see? A lunch club where people can get a meal and enjoy some company? Or is it an opportunity to share God's love? An opportunity to engage in meaningful and prayerful conversation? Holiday at home, an opportunity for simply a fun few days and for those who are lonely? Or is this an opportunity amongst the fun to share God's love intentionally by the way that we serve, the way that we are, to bring the churches together? The harvest is plentiful, the workers are few. The Leylands across the road, some of you live over there. What do you see? Do you see the things that go wrong and the little things that happen in the corners? Or do you see an opportunity for God's love to be shared? I do a monthly service there, and Easter I went over and did the Easter service, and the feedback I got was one lady was so moved by the message of Easter. I don't have the capacity to do all I could across the road. The harvest is plentiful, the workers are few, and I haven't even mentioned neighbours and nursing homes. And what about the things we do for well-being, renew, crafting, walking, not simply ends in themselves, but opportunities to be mindful and share a way of being that is about being more present, more aware. Well-being for the anxious people, for the burdened people, for the preoccupied people who are so busy. Taking time to be mindful, noticing, it is good for our well-being. The harvest is plentiful, the workers are few. Are you getting the picture? Freely you have received, freely give. We have received so much. Do we know it? Do we know the mercy that God has poured out for us? The Spirit that He has given us, the privilege of being called into His work. And it doesn't matter whether we're 5, 50 or 105. God has something for us all, because we all have friends. We all have family. We all connect somewhere The harvest is plentiful, the workers are few. And it does start in prayer. As Jesus took time away and aside to seek the Father, that his mind was brought back to what it should be, to make sure that he was focused and intentional. Be renewed by the be transformed by the renewing of your mind. What is God's unique calling for us? How might we live more attentively? How might we see beyond the surface? And yes, we have acknowledged some of those. So how do we go from seeing to coming alongside? The harvest is plentiful, the workers are few. It's going to get us to go into groups and talk. I'm conscious of time. Can I encourage you to talk about it over coffee? Rather than just do a little bit of a catch-up. What does this mean? What do we need to do? In your small groups this week, what does this look like? If you're not in a small group, I encourage you to join one. If you would like to know more, have a chat with me. Because there is an urgency to the task. People are harried, and there's a Simon and Garfunkel song that's kind of somewhere at the back of my mind, and someone can sing it to me afterwards. But the harried people along the streets, there is good news for them. Good news. And we are the ones who need to share it. Let's take a moment to be quiet. The speaker yesterday said to the group, where there is faith, there is hope. Paul's call to the church in Rome. Never be lacking in zeal. Keep your spiritual fervour, serving the Lord, be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, faithful in prayer. Lord, would you open our eyes? Would you open our eyes to see our community as you see it? We ask for a fresh seeing, a fresh view. Wherever we live, whatever we do from Monday to Saturday, Sunday afternoon, whatever we do in each hour of our lives, would you help us to see our communities as you see them? Those people that we would rather avoid, would you give us your love for them? And would you open our lips where we are fearful, where we'd rather stay quiet, where we'd rather just keep to ourselves and keep our faith private? Would you lay on our hearts those simple words to say, to encourage, to show love, and where we can, to share something of your love? Would you stir us up for mission in this community? Would you show us our calling? Would you place an urgency